Be me, Anon. Just a regular code monkey at a mid-sized tech company. Not F.A. Ang level, but we were good. Really good. We made specialized data management software for boring but very rich industries. Think logistics, energy, that kind of stuff. The money was good, the work was challenging, and the team was solid. For about 5 years, it was the best job I ever had. Our office culture was simple. Get your work done and do it well. That's it. No corporate rah-rah bullshit. No mandatory fun days. Your code and your results were all that mattered. Meritocracy in its purest form. At the center of this universe was Asher. Asher wasn't a manager. He wasn't a team lead. He was just Asher Senior Dev. But he was the guy, the oracle, the code whisperer. He was one of those 10x developers you read about but never actually meet. The dude would sit there, headphones on, staring at a screen for 6 hours straight without moving. Then he'd type for 15 minutes and solve a problem the rest of us had been wrestling with for 2 weeks. He never explained how he did it. He'd just push the commit with a note like fixed memory leak and go back to his trance. He was totally apolitical. I don't think I ever heard him talk about anything other than code architecture or his weirdly specific lunch orders. He was the load-bearing pillar of the entire engineering department. Then there was Jackson. Jackson was our lead project manager, a company veteran, been there since the beginning. If Asher was the brilliant but silent engine, Jackson was the chassis holding everything together. He knew every client, every project, every line of legacy code that was too scary for anyone else to touch. He was the guy who shielded us from stupid requests from sales and marketing. He mentored all the new hires, showed them the ropes. He had this calm, steady presence. When a project was on fire, Jackson was the guy you wanted in the room. He was fiercely loyal to the company and to his guys. One of those guys was Rylan. Rylan was a junior dev, maybe a couple of years out of college. Kid was hungry. He'd stay late, ask smart questions, take on the grunt work nobody else wanted. You could see he was putting in the hours to climb the ladder. Jackson took him under his wing, and Rylan was improving at an insane pace. We were all a well-oiled machine. Asher wrote the miracles, Jackson directed them, and guys like me and Rylan built the rest. Everything just worked. The company was growing, profits were up, clients were happy. It was a good place to be. Then, sometime last fall, the old HR manager retired, and the CEO, a guy who mostly just looked at spreadsheets from his corner office, hired her replacement. Her name was Victoria. She walked in on the first day and you could just feel the air change. She had that specific unwavering smile of someone who believes they are on a mission from God. Her first move was to schedule a mandatory, all-hands vision alignment meeting. We all shuffled into the main conference room. Asher actually took his headphones off for it, which was a rare event. Victoria stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation that was 90% corporate stock photos of diverse people laughing with salads. She started talking, and for the next hour we were flooded with a tsunami of buzzwords, synergizing our core values, unpacking our implicit biases, fostering a paradigm of inclusive equity. It was like a corporate speak generator had become sentient. Most of us just tuned out, mentally debugging code or thinking about what to have for lunch. But then she got to the main point, the grand initiative. She put up a slide with a graph showing the gender ratio in our company. Mostly male, especially in the tech and leadership roles. Shocker. Victoria announced that this was a systemic failure that needed bold, immediate action. Her solution was a new policy she called the Elevate and Empower Mandate. It sounded harmless enough until she explained the details. For the next fiscal year, all promotions to senior, lead, and management positions would be exclusively awarded to female candidates, not prioritized for, not encouraged for. Exclusively. She said it was the only way to aggressively correct the historical imbalance and break the patriarchal glass ceiling. The room was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. I looked over at Jackson. His face was a stone mask, not a flicker of emotion. Rylan just looked confused, like he was trying to figure out if this was a joke. Asher had already put his headphones back on and was staring at his phone. Victoria finished her speech with a flourish, asking if there were any questions. Nobody said a word. The silence was heavy, uncomfortable. She just smiled that unwavering smile and said, "Excellent. I'm so glad we're all on board for this exciting new chapter. The first few weeks after the announcement were weird. On the surface, nothing changed. We all still had our work to do. But there was an undercurrent of something: resentment, frustration. Guys would talk in hushed tones by the coffee machine. The mood had soured. The general feeling was, okay, this is stupid, but let's just keep our heads down, do our jobs, and maybe this will all blow over. We were wrong. About a month later, a team-led position opened up in the web development department. It was the perfect next step for Rylan. He had been taking on more and more responsibility. Jackson had been grooming him for it. Rylan had single-handedly optimized the front end for our biggest client's platform, cutting page load times by 60%. He put together a killer application, documenting all his achievements, his project contributions, everything. Jackson told him it was a slam dunk. Under the old system, it would have been. Then Victoria's HR department took over the hiring process. Rylan went in for his interview. He said it was bizarre. They barely asked him about his technical skills or his project successes. According to him, the questions were all things like, how do you, as a man, plan to make space for non-male voices in your team? And describe a time you recognized and confronted your own privilege. He did his best to answer the corporate nonsense, but he was a coder, not a sociologist. A week later, the announcement came out. The new team lead was a woman who had been with the company for maybe 8 months. Her technical skills were, to put it mildly, not great. She was the kind of developer who would copy-paste code from a tutorial without understanding it, then spend 3 days wondering why it didn't work. We'd all had to clean up her messes before. Her primary qualification for the job, as far as anyone could tell, was that she was a woman. And she got the job. Rylan got a form email from HR thanking him for his interest. That was the first real crack in the dam. Seeing Rylan after that was tough. The kid was completely gutted. All that ambition, all that drive he had, it just evaporated. He stopped staying late. He stopped volunteering for tough assignments. He just came in, did the absolute minimum required of him, and left at 5 p.m. on the dot. The spark was gone. He had learned the hard lesson that his hard work meant nothing. Jackson tried to talk to him, to keep his spirits up, but it was no use. The damage was done. The rest of us saw it too. It sent a clear message. Don't bother trying. Your effort is worthless here. Morale, which was already shaky, took a nosedive into the floor. But the real turning point, the thing that started the avalanche, was what happened to Jackson. Our department director, a guy who had been with Jackson since the early days, announced his retirement. This was it. This was Jackson's time. He had been the second in command for years. He knew the department inside and out. He had the respect of every single person on the team. It was the natural, logical, and deserved next step for him. He was the only person who could actually do the job effectively. Everyone knew it. We all just assumed that even Victoria's insane policy would have to have an exception for a case this obvious. Again, we were wrong. Jackson didn't even get a formal interview. Victoria announced the new director of engineering at another all-hands meeting. She introduced a woman from outside the company. Her resume was full of impressive-sounding titles from trendy startups that had all gone bankrupt within 2 years. Her entire professional experience was in marketing and brand management. She had never managed a technical team. She had never shipped a piece of software in her life. Her opening speech was a masterpiece of meaningless jargon. She talked about disrupting the tech space and leveraging our brand identity to a room full of engineers who just wanted to know about server specs and deployment schedules. We were all looking at Jackson. He stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, with that same stoic, unreadable expression. But you could see it in his eyes. 20 years of loyalty, of building this company from the ground up, and he had just been tossed aside for a complete stranger because of ideology. The new director was a disaster from day one. She didn't understand our product, our clients, or our workflow. She'd schedule pointless meetings that would last for hours, where she would talk about company culture and our brand's narrative. We were falling behind on critical deadlines because our new boss wanted to discuss the color palette for the new internal newsletter. The first major test came with Project Aegis. It was a massive security overhaul for our biggest client, a multi-billion-dollar energy consortium. The deadline was absolute. The penalty for being late was catastrophic, both financially and reputationally. Jackson had planned the entire project roadmap months in advance. It was complex, but achievable if we followed his plan. The new director threw his plan in the trash. She said it was uninspired and lacked a disruptive vision. She came up with her own plan, which she apparently designed over a weekend using a mind mapping app. It ignored all the technical dependencies. It promised features that were physically impossible to implement in the given time frame. It was, in short, a work of fantasy. Jackson tried to warn her. He went to her office and calmly, professionally, laid out the technical reasons why her plan would lead to failure. He explained the server architecture constraints, the database integration issues, the manpower limitations. Her response was to tell him that he had a negative mindset and was resisting a female-led vision. She accused him of being threatened by a strong woman in leadership. Jackson just walked out of her office without another word. So, we were forced to follow her insane plan. It was a death march. Nothing worked. The different modules didn't integrate. The new security protocols were causing catastrophic data corruption. The team was working around the clock, fueled by caffeine and pure despair. 2 weeks before the deadline, the whole system had a complete, catastrophic failure during a staging test. The core database was wiped. The backups were corrupted. It was the apocalypse. The new director panicked. She called an emergency meeting and started yelling, blaming the dev team for sabotage and incompetence. She had no idea how to fix it. She didn't even understand the nature of the problem. The client was calling, screaming. The CEO was finally starting to pay attention. We were looking at a company-killing event. That night, after the director had gone home in a huff, a few of us were still in the office, just staring at the wreckage, trying to figure out if anything was salvageable. Then Jackson walked in. He hadn't said much for weeks, just quietly doing his work. He put his bag down, rolled up his sleeves, and said, "All right, let's get to work." He sat down at the main console, and for the next 36 hours straight, he performed a miracle. He worked with a focus and intensity I've never seen. He was pulling obscure data recovery techniques out of thin air, rewriting corrupted binary files by hand, coordinating with the three of us who stayed with him. He was like a grandmaster playing 100 games of chess at once. Asher was at home, but Jackson was on the phone with him at 3 a.m., bouncing ideas off him. It was a masterclass in crisis management and technical expertise. Against all odds, by dawn on the second day, he had done it. He had recovered the database from the brink of Oblivion. He had patched the critical flaws. He had stabilized the system. Project Aegis was saved. The company was saved. He looked exhausted, but he had done it. He packed up his bag, told us to get some sleep, and went home. The following Monday, there was a big Project Aegis post-mortem meeting. The CEO was there. Victoria was there. The new director was there. The director stood up and began her presentation. She talked about how, under her visionary leadership, the team had faced a challenging but ultimately rewarding obstacle. She explained that she had empowered her team to think outside the box and innovate in a crisis. She presented the recovery of the system as the ultimate success of her management style. She took full, complete credit for everything Jackson had done. She never mentioned his name, not once. She portrayed him and the other senior guys as part of the old guard who had created the problems she had so brilliantly solved. I watched Jackson's face. Nothing. Not a single muscle moved. He just sat there, listening to this woman steal his triumph, erase his contribution, and paint him as the villain. And Victoria sat next to her, nodding approvingly. The CEO, who only understood the bottom line, saw that the project was back on track and praised the new director for her strong handling of the situation. That was the moment. That was the point of no return. It wasn't just about a missed promotion anymore. This was a deep, profound act of betrayal. A man had given 20 years of his life to a company, saved it from utter ruin through sheer will and brilliance, and his reward was to be publicly erased and implicitly blamed for the crisis he alone had solved. The meeting ended. We all filed out. Jackson walked back to his desk, sat down, and started typing. A few hours later, an email hit everyone's inbox. It was from him. The subject line was simple: "Thank you and farewell." It was his resignation letter. It was polite, professional. He thanked the company for the opportunities over the years and wished everyone the best. There was no anger, no accusations, just a clean, simple departure. But everyone who had been in that room knew the real reason. The next day, his desk was empty. A pillar of the company was gone, and the foundation began to crumble. With Jackson gone, the buffer between the engineering team and the incompetent leadership vanished. The new director was in full control, and she was driving us straight into the ground. But the biggest storm was yet to come. It had a name: Project Oblivion. This was our next generation platform, a complete rewrite of our core product. It was the company's future, a 5-year, multi-million-dollar investment. And the chief architect, the only person on the planet who understood its complexity from end to end, was Asher. Project Oblivion was Asher's baby. He had been designing the architecture for over a year in his spare time. It was a thing of beauty, elegant, scalable, a decade ahead of our competition. It was also fantastically complex. Only he truly understood all the moving parts. The company's entire future was riding on his brain. After Jackson left, the new director took personal ownership of Project Oblivion. This meant she sat in on the planning meetings, nodding and saying things like, "Let's leverage our agile velocity," while Asher tried to explain quantum-level database theory. Victoria's Elevate and Empower mandate was in full swing now. The 2 open lead developer positions for the project were, of course, filled by women. One of them was the same person who'd been promoted over Rylan. The other was a recent hire with a background in UI design who had decided she wanted to be a back-end engineer. They were now in charge of the 2 most critical modules of the new platform. The project kicked off, and it was a slow-motion train wreck. The code being submitted by the new leads was, I don't even have words for it. It was inefficient, full of security holes, and fundamentally broken. They were treating the core architecture that Asher had painstakingly built like a Lego set, snapping pieces together without understanding how they worked. Every morning, Asher would come in, and the first 3 hours of his day would be spent untangling the mess they had made the previous afternoon. He'd have to rewrite entire sections of their code just to stop the daily build from catching fire. He never complained. He never criticized them. He just quietly fixed it. But the workload was crushing him. This guy who used to be in a state of zen-like focus was now constantly juggling a dozen critical failures at once. He was doing his own job as chief architect, plus the jobs of 2 lead developers, plus the job of a quality assurance engineer. He started looking thin, pale. The dark circles under his eyes were becoming permanent fixtures. The project fell behind schedule. Drastically. The new director couldn't understand why. Her project management charts, full of colorful bars and encouraging labels, said everything should be fine. She couldn't grasp the technical reality. In her mind, if a task was assigned, it was as good as done. She and Victoria decided the problem wasn't incompetence. No, the problem was sabotage. The problem was the old guard. They called another mandatory meeting. This one was just for the Project Oblivion team. We all gathered in the same conference room where it all began. The air was thick with tension. Victoria stood at the front. The director stood beside her, arms crossed, looking severe. Victoria started to speak. She said she was deeply concerned about the culture on the team. She talked about a lack of collaborative spirit and a resistance to new leadership. She said that the new female leads were not being adequately supported. Then she looked directly at Asher. She never used his name, but her target was unmistakable. She talked about knowledge hoarding as a form of toxic masculinity. She said that senior male engineers sometimes create an unwelcoming environment by using overly complex language or by failing to mentor their female colleagues. She suggested that the project's delays were caused by a subtle refusal to share information from the legacy members of the team. I just stared at her, completely stunned. She was blaming Asher, the man who was single-handedly holding this entire catastrophe together, the man who was working 16-hour days fixing the very mistakes of the people. He was now being accused of not supporting. It was the most dishonest, insane gaslighting thing I had ever witnessed. She was painting him as the problem, him, the only thing stopping the company from imploding. The entire room was silent, watching Asher. He had been sitting in his usual spot in the corner, staring at the table. He slowly lifted his head. His face was calm. expressionless. He listened as Victoria finished her little speech, which ended with a threat about disciplinary action for anyone not fostering a fully inclusive and cooperative workspace. She asked if anyone had any comments. Silence. Then, very deliberately, Asher began to move. He took off his headphones and carefully coiled the wire. He placed them in his backpack. He closed his laptop. He took his company ID badge off the lanyard around his neck. He stood up, walked to the front of the conference table, and he placed the badge on the polished wood right in front of Victoria. He didn't say a single word. He just turned around, picked up his backpack, and walked out of the room. He didn't slam the door. He didn't make a scene. He just left. The finality of that simple silent act was deafening. It was more powerful than any shouting match. Victoria just stood there, mouth slightly open, for the first time looking genuinely shocked. Her perfect corporate smile was gone. She had pushed the quietest, most productive man in the company past his breaking point. She had broken the unbreakable pillar, and with that, the entire building came down. I went back to my desk, my heart pounding. I knew what I had to do. I typed up my own resignation letter. I was done. There was no saving this place. Before I could even email it, a message popped up on our team chat from Rylan. I quit. That's all it said. Then another from one of the senior database guys. Me too, it's been a disaster. Then another and another. It was a flood. Within an hour, 12 of the most senior and skilled engineers in the company had resigned. We didn't coordinate it. We didn't plan it. We had all individually seen the same thing. The moment Asher walked out, the company was finished. He was the linchpin. Without him, Project Oblivion was nothing but a folder of broken code. Without him, there was no one left who could fix the inevitable 5-alarm fires in our legacy systems. Staying would be professional suicide. The next day, the office was a morgue. More than half the desks in the engineering department were empty. The remaining staff, mostly the new hires and the recently promoted, were walking around with looks of sheer panic on their faces. The new director was running from meeting to meeting, yelling into her phone. Victoria was locked in her office. The collapse was faster and more brutal than any of us could have imagined. Project Oblivion was officially declared dead within 48 hours. The source code was a useless pile of digital rubble that no one understood. Then, the client from Project Aegis reported a major system outage. A critical bug had surfaced in a part of the system only Asher and Jackson truly understood. There was no one left to fix it. The client invoked the penalty clause in their contract, a multi-million-dollar hit. At the same time, 2 other major clients, hearing about the mass exodus of talent, pulled their contracts. The company's revenue stream was cut in half in the space of a week. The CEO finally emerged from his office. He looked like he had aged 10 years. His world of neat, predictable spreadsheets had been set on fire. He called an emergency meeting with all remaining department heads. We heard the story later from one of the marketing guys who was there. The CEO walked in, slammed a financial report on the table, and just looked at Victoria. He asked her to explain what had happened. She started to give one of her corporate speeches, talking about growing pains and cultural restructuring. He cut her off. He told her, in very clear, simple terms, that she had destroyed his company. He said he had looked into the resignations. He had spoken to a few people. He knew exactly what had happened. He pointed to the financial report and said that her ideological crusade had cost the company 20 years of growth and its entire reputation. He told her she was fired, effective immediately. He told her to pack her personal belongings and that security would escort her from the building. She was publicly and completely humiliated in front of the entire leadership team. The marketing guy said she just broke down, a complete meltdown. The unwavering smile was gone for good. The next day, the desperate phone calls began. The first one was to Jackson. The CEO himself called. He offered him his old job back. He offered him the director position. He offered him a massive pay raise and a huge bonus. Jackson listened patiently to the whole pitch. When the CEO was done, Jackson calmly said no. The CEO was stunned. He asked why. What would it take to get him back? Jackson's reply was simple. He said it was never about the money or the title. It was about respect, and that was something the company had proven it didn't have. Then the CEO tried to call Asher. He called his cell phone a dozen times. Asher never picked up. He never called back. He had simply vanished, a ghost in the machine he had built. The CEO tried to reach out to the rest of us. We all gave him the same answer. No. The damage was done. The trust was gone. There was no going back. So, what happened after all that? The old company limped on for a few more months, a shell of its former self. Eventually, it was bought out by a larger competitor for pennies on the dollar, just for its client list. Most of the remaining staff were laid off. Victoria, according to her LinkedIn profile, is now a freelance diversity and inclusion consultant, which I assume means she's unemployed. And us, the ones who left. A couple of weeks after the exodus, Jackson got a call from our biggest competitor. They wanted to build a new department to take on the exact kind of projects we used to do. They wanted him to lead it, and they gave him a blank check to hire whoever he wanted. His first call was to Asher. Asher actually answered the phone for him. Jackson offered him the position of chief architect. Complete creative control, a budget that was borderline infinite, and a promise that he would never have to deal with a single piece of corporate bullshit ever again. Asher's response was a single word. Okay. Then Jackson called me. He called Rylan. He called every single one of the key guys who had walked out. Every one of us said yes without hesitation. We're all here now, at the new company. We have our team back. The machine is running again, better than ever. We have a leadership that trusts us, respects our skills, and judges us only on the quality of our work. We're building something new, and it's going to be incredible. It's funny. Victoria thought she was breaking up a boys' club. In the end, all she did was prove that a team built on merit and mutual respect is a powerful thing. And if you try to break it with ideology and injustice, it won't just fight back. It will simply move somewhere else and leave you behind in the ruins you created.